Jordan Peele's Us. I think at this point, I think it's confirmed pretty much that Jordan Peele really has solidified himself as kind of like a master of horror here. You might remember from 2017, he did the award-winning film Get Out, which is a great film. Like I still love going back to it and trying to like pick out little pieces of it. Very smartly crafted and very very clever, and its terror and its societal commentary in there. And Us just ups the ante. It ups the ante on everything and firmly solidifies that Peele is not just going to be a one-note director. Like he's not going to fall in kind of like the Neil Blomkamp's the Neil Blomkamp camp of just like repeating himself with like the same themes over and over again. Here he's actually working with different themes, with a much different type of horror, somewhat similar themes here, but delivered in a much different way. So the story is you have Lupita Nyong'o playing this woman at Adelaide, who has had a traumatic childhood experience. In the 1980s, she wandered off on the beach near a carnival in Santa Cruz, and she ends up going into this kind of weird kind of like vision quest house. It's basically a hall of mirrors, and once she's in there, she discovers, oh, there's a doppelganger of myself in there, and that it freaks her out, and it makes her silent, and it leaves a lasting impact on her. Now you fast forward to when she's grown up, and she has a family of her own. She has a very very eccentric husband. She has a typical girl, always on the phone. She has a crazy little boy who's always wearing masks and trying to do magic tricks. A kind of a typical family. They're a fun bunch. We get to know them, we get to like them pretty well. But she can't shake that fear of what happened to her when she was young, and she knows that it's following her to Santa Cruz, not just because this is where she experienced the trauma, but that there's something else here. There's some kind of like evil presence lingering. It turns out she's right, as not too long after they arrive, there's a collective family that basically are seen in the darkness, and they break into their house and basically assault them with intentions to kill them. And they happen to look like the family. Now, I'm going to try to not do any spoilers here, because I really don't want to spoil this, but I almost wish I could, because then I could talk about the deeper themes here. I will say this, though. I like the way that that Peele kind of like doles out the horror and the message here, because the message is not as... It's not a kind of like as blunt as Get Out. Like Get Out was like kind of fairly blunt, where if you put the pieces together well enough, you could assemble it pretty well. Us kind of like deeply keeps everything very subtle. Everything is very, very, very subtle in this film, and I love that. I love how they don't spoon feed you information here about what's going on, or how all this makes sense. Like especially like with the whole like doppelganger family. They don't give like a direct explanation for that, and kind of leave it more up to the it's kind of similar to the means of like Get Out, because like in Get Out, they didn't really explain like the mechanics of what they were doing. It's more about like the intent and the societal commentary behind it. Us is very much the same way, except Us really doesn't spell it out. Like it's and I love that, because it keeps it buried under like a whole bunch of visual cues and themes, and just like and the cinematography and the way it's shot, and the way that the kind of story dashes back and forth between different tones. And I love that. I love how you're always looking at the screen, you're always trying to figure it out, and you're always trying to both try to figure out the situation and trying to figure out what is this all leading up to. Like what does this actually mean? And I love how, like, a perfect example of how this doesn't spoon feed you information. Like at one point, the little version, the sorry, the younger version of Adelaide goes to when she goes to see her doppelganger for the first time. One of the things she sees is a Bible verse. Well, I mean, like one of those signs, say like John 3:16. There's one that says Jeremiah 11:11. Now, thankfully, the film never actually tells you what this verse is. And when you actually do go up to when you actually do go to look up the verse later, it's still a little bit subtle and vague about what its intent means. But there's also like other little meanings into it, like, you know, what is the significance of, you know, 1111, and what is the significance of duplicates. And at one point, God, I can't go into too many spoilers because I want to get deeper into this. But I will say that Peele does carry over a lot of elements that are kind of becoming like trademarks of his films. The most obvious one is the visual of having the lead being so terrified that their eyes are kind of like big and bloodshot and kind of like bugging out with pure terror. You saw it in Get Out, and you see it here in Us too. I love that. Another great thing too is like similar to Get Out, but also kind of upping the ante, is the great mixture of tones here. Like, this is very much a very disturbing and twisted horror film, but at the same time, it's also very comedic. And that comedy kind of like it maintains throughout. Like, if you were to look at like, you know, like a typical slasher film of like, you know, a family goes on vacation and then they're attacked by killers, it's usually, you know, they start off the film like everything's nice and cheery and happy and family bond together, and then the killers come and then everything goes dark and dreadful and characters are just screaming for their lives and they're doing irrational things. But the really cool thing about Us, I think that I love most of all, was the fact that these tones stay consistent. Like, we start with a traumatic and horrific experience, and we keep it throughout the film. We start seeing the family as kind of this kind of silly, kind of fun family. We have great dialogue and great banter and chemistry between each other, and it continues throughout the film. Even when things get dark and bloody, they're still kind of cracking jokes. Now, that's not to imply that this is a horror comedy. It's just that the script has such an ease with how it goes about it, that it has the time to make these little stops for great moments of comedy. And not over-the-top comedy. I mean, just kind of like, you know, more kind of human, relatable type comedy that comes in here and there. And I love how it weaves itself so well, to the point where you're going to find yourself laughing pretty well at times, and then be quickly snapped out of, be quickly shocked by something else that comes in. Like, you know, like maybe the killers break in, maybe the glass breaks, maybe one of them cracks a joke and they're all of a sudden attacked. At one point they're bickering about, you know, how many of the killers they've killed, like little stuff like that. I also got to mention too, like Lupita Nyong'o, she's amazing in this film, especially for the climax where she's expected to pull off a very tricky final battle. I will just say it involves some very intricate kind of like cinematography and staging. I love the way that it's shot. But I also got to mention the supporting cast of Tim Heidecker and Elizabeth Moss as kind of this you know, kind of this couple that has like a bitterness that they hide behind, you know, booze and smiles, who are also at Santa Cruz with Adelaide's family. I love the fact that, well, here's the thing, like Tim Heidecker, he can do pretty well with just like kind of like an ease of comedy where he doesn't have to try for laughs. Like at one point, like it plays very well with the horror. And Elizabeth Moss, I wish she was in more horror films, because she, you know, if you've seen her stuff like Queen of the Earth, or I think it was just called Queen of Earth, she looks really good if she's like kind of like a mess with just kind of like makeup smeared and blood all over her. I wish there were more horror films with her. She's so good in them. That being said, though, we got to mention like the rest of the family are just as good here. I love Winston Duke playing this very eccentric husband who wants to, you know, go out and buy a boat, and he wants to, you know, he just wants to have fun, just wants to get everyone motivated. He does a great job getting in the mood while kind of being while walking that fine line between being a fun dad and an embarrassing dad. It's just right on the level here. You also have some new talents here of let me see if I can pronounce them right here. Shahadi Wright Joseph as Zora, the little girl, and Evan Alex as the little brother of Jason. They do pretty well in these performances, even though most of their performances are more physical based. Like they have a lot more scenes where they're required to outrun or outsmart the killers, which is pretty good. I like the way that they use them here, especially how they keep them a little bit more as supporting players to this main plot that essentially is all about Lupita's character. And she's amazing in this. She pulls off a fantastic performance. Like, this is on the same level as like Toni Collette in Hereditary. last year. You're probably gonna see a little bit of like an Oscar push for Lupita here, and hopefully it happens, because otherwise I think it's gonna be like another Hereditary situation here. But yeah, this is a film that a lot of people have kind of been comparing Peele to other filmmakers, because he kind of like has little bits and elements in there, like, you know, there's a little bit of like Stanley Kubrick, you know, with kind of like the 11:11 and the duplicates in there. There's a little bit of Brian De Palma, especially in one specific shot where you have like a close up on one character and you see another in the background, where you get kind of like a dioptic shot. It's very much Brian De Palma. You might even get a little bit of, you know, like Spielberg's. There's a Spielberg reference in there. There's even a Home Alone reference in there. But I would just want to make it clear, this, you know, a lot of people saying like, you know, Jordan Peele's just a new Jordan Peele. You know, he shouldn't be compared to these other directors, even though he's using familiar elements of these directors. And I agree, because Peele's work here, it's establishing its own iconography, and it's even though it's like drawing from other elements, it's very much its own thing and very different from like what these other directors have done. So it's not a throwback film. This film, it touches on a lot of big stuff here. I love how it brings up parts of like identity and nostalgia and nationalism, all of which is addressed sometimes a little bit bluntly, but most of the time it's kept pretty subtle, very artfully. I love the great use of creepy violins for the soundtrack, for when like characters are being stalked. Feels very old fashioned and traditional, but again, kind of its own thing here. And I gotta mention again that climax with Lupita. I cannot get it out of my head. I've seen this film 2 days ago, and it's still stuck in my head. I can't stop thinking about this movie. I want to run back, and I want to like watch it again, and I want to like look at every little thing now, especially because when you get to, you know, it's kind of similar to Get Out, where there is kind of a twist at the end here, but once even when I know that twist, like now I want to go back, because now I want to look at every single little visual cue, and try to examine it deeper. Like, this is unlike this, like relating back to Kubrick. This is relating kind of, you know, more to like Shining, where people are going to start, you know, tapping into this film and trying to form their own theories about it. You're going to see, trust me, when this film comes out on like home video, and when it solidifies itself a little bit more in the mainstream, you're going to see a lot of theories about this movie. You're going to have a lot of people talking about this film. Because it's a very smart, it's a very sophisticated film. At the same time, it's very silly at times, and it's also a really good kind of like classic slasher chase flick. That's what I wanted to say. It's very much in that vein, so it manages to pull off all these elements so well, and I could not get enough of this film. There was never a moment where I was bored. There was never a moment where I wasn't engaged. Even if you're one of those, if you don't quite grasp all the societal commentary that's going on here, there's enough energy and atmosphere here where you're still going to find yourself engrossed. You're still going to find yourself just, you know, getting on the edge of your seat here, trying to get closer to the screen, trying to figure it out, and you'll still have a great time with the dialogue and the way they stage a lot of these chases and these horrific elements here. It's all just so brilliantly well done, and I cannot wait to see more from Jordan Peele. So Jordan Peele's Us, 5 out of 5 stars.